Sir, good afternoon. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, thank you. So who have we got this afternoon, Mr. Beer? Who wants to ask questions, I mean?
Just before you carry on, sir, I've just had whispered in my ear the fact that there's a problem with the transcriber. I'm not sure what that means. Could you just give us a moment to investigate, please?
Yes, of course, yeah.
It's not a problem that we've encountered before. It's that one of the transcriber's machines is not working. It appears to be something quite fundamental. I would propose that we continue because obviously the live recording, the live broadcast is being recorded and therefore a transcript can be made of it retrospectively.
Right. That seems sensible to me, unless anyone in the room thinks that there's a problem with that.
No, thank you very much, sir. So first it's Mr. Steen.
Right.
Mr. Patterson, my name is Sam Steen. I appear on behalf of many sub-postmasters, mistresses. I'm instructed by a firm of solicitors called Howe & Co. Now, online, we can see that Fujitsu publishes its purpose, which is to build trust in society through innovation. Do you agree that instead, that the combination of Fujitsu and the Post Office's creation of this scandal has damaged trust in innovation within society?
I think the history of this appalling miscarriage, Mr. Steen, would tend to point that yes, trust has been broken, and trust in technology and how technology is used and not used, it has tested us all.
Mr. Patterson, you've explained this week and today that Fujitsu is committed to engaging with government to provide a suitable contribution and redress to sub-postmasters and their families. Now, within this inquiry, the question of how compensation is being dealt with has been described variously. We've put it as being a scandal within a scandal. Will you commit to making sure that what Fujitsu does regarding its own offer to put money into the government's pot to assist with compensation does not delay or sidetrack the efforts to secure proper compensation for sub-postmasters and mistresses?
And Mr. Steen, yes, I can commit to that. And I think the way that we've tried to engage with the inquiry and engage with government shows that we are very committed to finding the truth, and we will do nothing to delay that.
Now, you're aware, Mr. Patterson, that sub-postmasters, mistresses, managers, people that worked in sub-post branches, their lives and their families' lives have been ruined, devastated by the decades of this scandal. And those people that we represent have lived through the great Post Office cover-up, the Second Sight investigation, Second Sight and what happened in relation to their reports, the time that the brave 555 sub-postmasters took on the Post Office at the High Court and exposed the corruption within the heart of this scandal, and then the Criminal Court of Appeals. And now, of course, they're living through the Post Office inquiry. Help us understand, Mr. Patterson, why did it take so long for Fujitsu to decide it had a moral obligation to put its hands in its pockets and provide money, not just apologies?
So as you said in your comments, this is a decades-old miscarriage which started a long time ago and involves many people and organisations in that. I think Fujitsu more recently, as we've understood more, we have clearly let society down and the sub-postmasters down. I think we had our obligations to the Post Office to be at the front of everything we were doing, and that was wrong. And I think subsequently we've now seen where the evidence has taken us and the investigation has taken us, and that's why you've had the statements from Fujitsu more recently. I can't comment on the past, Mr. Stern. I don't know why things weren't done in 1999 or 2005 or 10. I don't know. But what I can say is that as long as I'm here and doing what I'm doing, I'm going to do everything to make sure that we get to the truth.
But Mr. Patterson, that's not quite true, is it? Fujitsu's commitment, what it now appears to accept via you, a moral obligation to pay up, that's only been most recently expressed by you. Whereas the apology from Fujitsu has been expressed the opening stages of this inquiry, in your statements to this inquiry. Why has it taken so long for Fujitsu to own up to the fact it needs to put its hand in its billion-pound pockets and pay something towards compensation? Why so long?
Mr. Stern, I don't know the answer to that question. I can only tell you my honest view today, which is we have come to this conclusion as we've gone through the inquiry and gathered our evidence and considered our moral obligations to the victims of this crime. And that is why you've heard what I've said most recently. Again, I don't know why in the past we didn't say those things.
Have you met a single sub-postmaster?
No, I have not, Mr. Stern.
Will you commit today to meeting with sub-postmasters, their legal representatives, Howe & Co., the firm that has instructed me in this relation to this matter, and discussing with them the way forward that Fujitsu can assist in seeking to show that Fujitsu means what it says by its apology and by its commitment to provide financial redress?
Mr. Stern, I have not met any sub-postmasters in the past because I didn't feel it was appropriate for me to do that. If that is a request from the sub-postmasters and their representation, I will absolutely do that, and I will sit down there with my colleagues, as you just said.
Now, you're aware that the effect of this scandal upon sub-postmasters was very much felt by their families, by their loved ones, by their partners, by their children. This devastated not only the sub-postmasters' individual lives, but everyone around them. Sub-postmasters, because they could not see what was going on, would sometimes blame their own partners or their employees. And the effect, therefore, of this scandal is much more widespread than on sub-postmasters themselves. Lives sometimes have been terminated by this scandal. Will Fujitsu commit to providing funds in recompense for all of those hurts to others outside of sub-postmasters and the compensation scheme? In other words, financial redress to support others that have been affected. Now, you may want to think that what could be done by Fujitsu is supporting people in the future, sub-postmasters, in future entrepreneurial endeavours, their families in such, or in education. Will Fujitsu consider that type of support?
Mr. Stern, the inquiry and the exploration of the history of all this is getting a great deal of attention and support from us. Our company here in the UK does many things in society, around the country, around the UK. I think the suggestion you've just made, and clearly in a conversation, if I was to be able to engage in that with sub-postmasters and their representatives, would be absolutely something we would like to consider. I think skills in our country, without jumping too far, is very important. And I think there are things that we can do in our technology world that may or may not be of help to sub-postmasters and their associated families. So I would engage in that conversation, Mr. Stern. I can't promise the outcome of that, but I would engage in it in the right way.
And do you agree that a restorative justice process for sub-postmasters, their families, their loved ones, and everyone affected should include making sure that Fujitsu does what it can to put those people back into their rightful place within their own communities, restoring the trust and the honour that they have lost through this process?
Mr. Stone, the company is completely committed to doing that through the inquiry and my comments to the Select Committee and to government. There are many parties involved in this, and we have a part to play in that, and we'll do everything that we can do to address those wrongs in whatever way we can.
Mr. Patterson, sitting to my left is Mr. Enright, one of the partners at Howe & Co Solicitors. He is available today for you to speak to. Can you make time to speak to him, to start that conversation with him today?
So, Mr. Stone, we'll finish at whatever time we finish today, and I would be welcome to exchange contact details, at least Mr. From Howe & Co.
Mr. Enright.
Forgive me, Mr. Enright. More time, I don't know when we're going to finish, but would I be absolutely, Mr. Enright, and exchange our cards and we can have that conversation. Clearly, there are other people on Fujitsu's side would need to be attending to that.
And you're probably aware, Mr. Patterson, that some of our clients are here today. They may wish to speak to you or exchange details or set up meetings with you. And again, would you accept that that is something you will conduct, if possible, today, but otherwise make arrangements with you and your team?
So, Mr. Stern, I will talk to anybody at any juncture. I have a great deal of respect for the sub-postmasters. I have no understanding because I've never gone through what they've personally gone through. And through our own team here and our representatives, more than happy to engage in that conversation. I have to say, I'm not sure today's the right time and the place for it, if you'll allow me, but I'll absolutely do that.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson.
Who's next?
So I think Ms. Dobbin has some questions.
Yes.
Mr. Patterson, hope you can hear me. I represent Gareth Jenkins. My name is Claire Dobbin. I have a couple of questions for you. They're rather more technical in nature. Are you in a position to explain or provide any information as to whether or not the Post Office, in fact, agreed the parameters of the ARQ return? Do you understand my question?
I think I do, Ms. Stubbins. In my evidence today, and I think previously, there's a very clear document that says what the material should be, what the parameters, forgive me, inside an ARQ need to be, and that was something that came from the Post Office to Fujitsu.
Thank you. And do you happen to know why Post Office wanted that type of information or applied that criteria to what they wanted when they made an ARQ request?
Not all the time. I think in the flow chart we saw earlier that some of it would have been for prosecutory type support. I think on the other side of that flow chart was other reasons for ARQs, and there could be a vast array of those, I'd imagine, that the Post Office criteria, why the Post Office would request that.
All right, so it sounds, Mr. Patterson, as though that question might be directed better to someone else who might understand those parameters, but thank you. When we look at some historic ARQ requests, going back quite a long time, and I'm talking about the pro forma type form that you will have seen that Post Office sent. Have you seen any of those?
Yes, they're in the exhibits, I believe.
It's right, isn't it, that one of the things that Post Office could request in that was confirmation that there were no reported system malfunctions. Is that correct? Have you seen that?
I think it is in the exhibit. If we could probably go to the exhibit, I think it shows the criteria.
I'm not sure I have the exhibit to hand. I've certainly got one that maybe I could use, unless Mr. Beard does have the exhibit.
I think if we display FUJ 0015 2562, that's an example one. I don't know whether that will suit Ms. Dobbin's purpose.
I'm very grateful to Mr. Beard. So we have, this is, I think, a typical one. And no, this is a different type of one. If I perhaps can try another type. I think these may have changed over time, Mr. Patterson. Can I just see if I can get one that I think has been seen before? May I try and see if POL 000 54125 is on the system? It's not.
That'll be a no, it's not on the system.
Well, can you take it from me, Mr. Patterson? It's the ARQ request that was made in the case of Mrs. Seema Misra. And we see this in other ARQ requests made before that time in the standard form. And just to repeat, one of the options it allowed the post office was to ask for confirmation that there were no reported system malfunctions. And I think you're not familiar with that, I think, from what you're saying.
Correct.
If that's right, that obviously indicates, doesn't it, that there was that option open to post office when making a given AR, or when submitting an ARQ request.
Yes, if that was one of the options on the submission, yes.
Thank you. I wanted to go then to your witness statement. And again, Mr. Patterson, if I'm asking you a question that's beyond your knowledge, please do say. So if we go to your witness statement at WITN 066 50300. And please may we go to paragraph 102, page 47. So page 47. Thank you. Now, this is talking about changes that were brought in the context of Craig Park. And that's talking about event messages. Have you had a chance to look at that?
Yes.
And then paragraph 103, please. This is talking about a change proposal that was made in relation to the audit system. And this is talking about the automatic retrieval and filtering of event data.
Understood.
As I've said, please, if this is beyond your knowledge, please do say. But is it right that the checking of NT events, that started to become part of a routine process after the Craig Park incident?
So you're correct, I don't know.
You don't know. All right. I will try someone else with that. Thank you, Mr. Patterson. And then finally, just this. When you were asked questions about Anne Chambers and her experience at the High Court, you said that you were horrified that she was being contacted directly by a solicitor who was acting for the post office. And you appeared to be basing that on your knowledge of how a corporation should work and how its employees should be involved in legal proceedings. Have I got that right?
So my concern was that any employee was involved in a direct conversation with a legal representative without representation from either our company or our own legal representatives. It's such a serious engagement. I felt it was not appropriate. And clearly, Mrs. Chambers didn't feel the same for her just to be involved in that conversation.
So in other words, the company would act as a sort of interlocutor to be part of the dialogue with the employee to make sure they understood what they were doing and what was being asked of them.
So I think, as Mr. Bearden asked me earlier, this concept of expert witness and witness of fact, it's a very serious, and these were dealing with serious matters. I did not feel, and clearly Ms. Chambers didn't feel the same, that it's just a conversation. And I think it needed proper representation and engagement.
Thank you. And you also said, I think, that you were horrified or certainly taken aback that she was being contacted by a solicitor in order to deal with disclosure as well.
Yes.
And again, is that for the same reason that it's really the company that should be involved in that process?
Well, whether it's the company or not, I think, Ms. Dobbins, my point is that these are such serious matters for the case in front of the courts and the impact potentially on a sub-postmaster. It needed to be dealt with the right professionals in the room, taking the right advice and looking at the conversation and what was being asked of her in that particular case.
Yes, to make sure it was understood.
Absolutely.
What she needed to do. I'm grateful to you, Mr. Patterson. Thank you.
Before anybody else asks a question, can I just be clear about one of the answers you gave to Ms. Dobbin about the form upon which data, ARQ data, is sought by the post office. Am I to understand that that form is created by the post office without any input by Fujitsu, or is it a combined effort, or what? I'm not quite sure where we are with that, so I'd just like you to tell me again, if you could.
So when I think the way I understood the question was the form that is sent to Fujitsu requesting ARQ data. Mr. Beard showed one. Ms. Dobbin, I think, was referring to another version of it. That is a document that would come from the post office to Fujitsu, I understand, saying what criteria to apply. I think it had evolved over time, but it's a document from the post office to Fujitsu.
I follow the trail, so to speak. It goes from the post office to Fujitsu. My query is, who created that document in the first place?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
All right, fine. Thank you.
So before Ms. Page asks her questions, I think I can help on that issue to a limited extent. And so, although it's slightly out of order, because it's an issue that has raised its head now by virtue of your question, I wonder whether we could look at FUJ 401318. Sorry, that's the wrong reference. This is what happens when you ask a question.
Well, I'll try to be quiet from now on, Mr. Beer.
Now, I am going to retrieve the position. FUJ 00152209. This was the Fujitsu 2005 document.
Yeah.
See that it was a procedure or a policy document, interestingly dated. Received lots of correspondence about this in the course of the day, 29th of February 2005. 2005 wasn't a leap year, so it must have been misdated. But that aside, it's excited lots of attention. We can find an annex within this document
Right, I see.
at page 28. And just like there was what I've called a boilerplate witness statement, a template witness statement, there was a template ARQ form. earlier in the policy document, it set out when you're making an ARQ or when the post office is making an ARQ request, this is the document that it should use.
Right, so effectively, it's a Fujitsu created document which the post office then sends to Fujitsu to make its request.
Yes, the position, as Ms Dobbin has said, does move on from this, and we can explore with other witnesses and by looking at other documents how the amendments to this form were made, by whom and when.
But that's how it started, as a Fujitsu created document.
Yes.
Fine, thanks.
Thank you, sir. I hope that helps. So,
Yes, it does, thank you.
Ms Page, I think was the last person who wished to ask questions.
Over to you, Ms Page.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Patterson. I appear for a number of postmasters, including Mr. Castleton and Mrs. Misra. First of all, the inquiry has heard evidence that providing ARQ data to the Post Office brought in £850,000 per annum, which is obviously small beer in the grand scheme of things, but nevertheless, would you agree, a reasonably handy bit of extra income?
I think that's a very material sum of money.
So then there's that, and then on top of that, there were charges for witnesses to appear in court and provide their evidence. We understand, for example, that in the trial of Tracy Felsted, there was a charge of £20,000 for a witness to attend court. It was never in fact paid, but that was the proposed sum of money. Have you ever looked into or found out about how much money Fujitsu charged for the services of Gareth Jenkins, for example, as a witness over the years?
No, I have not.
Would you accept that litigation support was a useful cash cow for Fujitsu?
I was professionally very surprised that that service even existed. We're meant to be an IT company, not a prosecution support service, and for that to be designed in from the very earliest stages, I was very, very surprised at it. In terms of the work associated with doing it, I have no view on it. I am amazed that it was even in the contract.
Are you saying, in effect, that this is not something that Fujitsu was set up to do and not really something that Fujitsu was skilled at or able to do properly?
So if I look at today, Ms Page, there is no contract that I've ever signed where that obligation and the extent of that obligation sits inside it. I do not understand why it was there. And clearly it was there for, and is still there actually, for a very, very long time.
And as a result of that, and moving on to my next question, we see the consequence, don't we, of that sort of exceptional and perhaps unprepared for contractual service, because as we know, Anne Chambers gave evidence in less than ideal circumstances in the Castleton trial.
I agree.
In that trial, Mr. Justice Havery ruled that Horizon did not cause the losses at Mr. Castleton's branch, and that the Horizon shortfalls were, quotes, real deficiencies caused by mismanagement at Mr. Castleton's branch. And that was, in essence, founded on Miss Chambers's evidence. Do you agree that this blurring of the lines between witness of fact and expert witness on the overall system's health was what led to this wrongful judgment?
I don't know whether that led to it. As I said earlier in my answers to Mr. Beer, I have learned in preparation for this inquiry some of the differences between those two roles, an expert and a matter of fact. I do not believe, and Anne Chambers made it clear, that was understood by the Fujitsu employee either. I don't know whether it directly led to that. I'm afraid, Ms. Page, I'm not skilled to know that.
Would you accept that it must have contributed materially to it?
I think all of that would have contributed materially. And Ms. Chambers was very clear. Mrs. Chambers was very clear about her view of that.
And similarly, as part of that trial, in the proceedings in the run-up to it, one of the formal court statements of case said, Fujitsu services have looked at the Post Office's computer system and have confirmed that the losses were not caused by the Post Office's systems, software or hardware. And the Post Office solicitor signed off on that with a statement of truth. So in other words, it was testifying to Fujitsu examining the system and finding that the losses were not caused by the system. Do you know who at Fujitsu could have authorised that verbiage?
No, I don't.
Will you find out?
We have representation here, and if we can find out, we'll absolutely find out. As to my earlier commitment to the inquiry, we are delving into all the areas of information that we've got, and if it exists, we will find it. I'm afraid I don't know at this present time the answer to your question, Ms. Patch.
Turning then to the trial of Seema Misra, in your statement you describe the duplicate data issue that affected the ARQ data that was served in that trial. And as you say, Gareth Jenkins did actually provide a statement about it, didn't he? And he let the Seema Misra defence team know about that one issue.
I believe that is in the exhibits here as well, and in the evidence in the third corporate statement. Yes.
Would you agree that as a one-off incident, that wasn't perhaps the most serious of the data integrity problems, but as part of a series of data integrity problems, it was more concerning?
I think all the data integrity problems are serious, and earlier on today we talked about the witness evidence and the clauses in bringing all of those points to disclosure for the sub-postmaster and their representatives. So I think all of those things, whether it's one item or the other 4 or 5 that we discussed with Mr. Beer.
Well, what I'm touching on here is the fact that one particular problem was disclosed and wrapped up in a bow, as it were. Here it is, here's a problem, but we've fixed it. And that in effect sanitised the situation, because this was really one of a series of problems with the audit data.
So I'd agree with that. I think, as we discussed earlier in evidence, the disclosure of all the things that could or could not impact needed to be disclosed, and it's very evident in the witness statements that was edited out.
And therefore, Seema Misra was not given the whole truth about the audit data problems.
I think that's very clear.
Do you think that this came about as the result of pressure from above on the likes of Mr. Jenkins?
I really don't know, Ms. Bay, and I've got no evidence before me that's been produced for me in my submission today to the inquiry that there was that. And I believe in other phases there's more inquiry around governance and such matters.
What has been done within Fujitsu to independently verify the investigation and remediation of these various audit data problems?
Just say
well, has there been any external or independent effort to investigate and remediate these problems?
I believe that the current version of HNGX or HNG, which is HNG everywhere, is substantially different to the previous versions. I am unaware whether we've taken any third-party advice to go and audit that system again and the data that's in it and how it's discovered, Ms. Page. I'd need to take that one away as a question for the inquiry.
Thank you. Well, that would be helpful,
Yeah.
and really perhaps broaden that out a little. Has there ever been any expert external investigation of the audit data function?
I am unaware whether there has been.
On a similar issue, has anyone been held internally accountable for these audit data problems at any stage, historically or more recently?
I am unaware of whether anybody has been. I think in our letter to the Select Committee back in 2020, we undertook that if there were current employees who had done some of these things in a way that was against our policy, we would take disciplinary action against those individuals. I am unaware, Ms Page, whether we have found anybody along those lines.
Going back more historically then, you will know about the problems with the EPOS code which were brought to light by David McDonnell.
You'd need to give me more to go on, I'm afraid.
This is going right back to the start, that there were significant problems found with the EPOS code and that they were nevertheless, it was a decision taken not to rewrite and to allow the code to be monitored and watched in operation in the live state.
Okay.
Is that not ringing bells for you?
I remember a little bit on EPOS. Forgive me, I don't know Mr. MacDonald or the time frames around that.
Well, I think that probably answers my question, which it seems anyway that nobody in current leadership has made the link or considered the link between the failures in the EPOS code and the failures in the audit data that was being supplied through the litigation support service. Nobody in the current team has made that link. Is that a fair assumption?
I really don't know. I know what I know, and I don't know the particulars of that.
All right.
We can certainly the team will take that one away.
Well, again, that sounds very helpful, Mr. Patterson, and certainly another question arising from that is the historic question. Did nobody historically make that pretty obvious connection between very poor code going out into operation and then very poor data coming out and through the litigation support service?
Whether people made that connection or not, what is very, very evident, I think, in our evidence today and in the previous corporate statements, is that connection and understanding about what was going on and where was understood by certainly Fujitsu and certainly understood by Post Office right back to 1999. It's all about what you do with that information. And I think that's the key. Forgive me, that is a question for this inquiry. I know that the inquiry is testing.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, sir.
I think I agree with you, Mr. Patterson. It is a key question. Right. Any other advocates wish to ask any questions?
No, sir, there are not.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Patterson, for coming to give oral evidence and obviously at least participating in making 3 very detailed witness statements. I think you understand that you will in all probability be recalled at a future date, but for the time being, well, not for the time being, you were now released, so to speak, from your status as a witness, which means that you can continue having discussions with your team, etc., to answer any questions which the inquiry asks of you in the future, and to help you make any further witness statements that are necessary. All right. Normally, when a witness is to give further evidence, then there is an embargo on such discussions, but that's not practical in an inquiry of this sort. So as I've said, you're free to speak to your team about all relevant matters now.
Thank you, Mr.
All right. So we're ready to start at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, Mr. Beard. Is that it?
Yes, that's right, sir.
All right. See you then.
Yeah,
Bye.
Thank you very much.